Good morning, ladies. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shaar. We're studying Shaar Hayichud v'Hamuna. If you have a Tanya in front of you, if you have an English lessons in Tanya, we're chapter 7, page 936. If you have a Hebrew Tanya, we're again toward the end of Perek Zion, on page 168, a little more than halfway through the page, by the open bracket where it says, Ba'achar kol hatzimtzumim. Okay, so we're learning already for a couple of weeks. The Alter Rebbe quotes from the Raya Mehemna that the Eibashter, that the Rabbeinu Shalom, is Sovev Kalalman and Mamala Kalalman. Sovev Kalalman, the Alter Rebbe explains relatively briefly. Mamala Kalalman is explained at great length. Mamala Kalalman, the Alter Rebbe explains, is this attribute of Hashem, that this koyach, if you will, this function, call it what, this level of Hashem, of the Eibashter, that relates to every created being in a personal way, in a tailored way toward its existence, that which provides a different koyach elaki, a different godly force for every different created being, right? No two created beings are exactly the same, and so each one has its own koyach elaki. This is called Mamala Kalalman. This is the koyach elaki, the Alter Rebbe says, which brings this being into existence and differentiates it from other created beings. This is called Mamala Kalalman. It's experienced, unlike Sovev Kalalman. Mamala Kalalman is experienced through Tzimtzumim Rabim Va'atzumim, many powerful and many great Tzimtzumim, so that the Elokus can come down to each particular specific being. All right, these Tzimtzumim, the Alter Rebbe explained, are experienced through the Oisiyos. The Oisiyos, first of all, the Oisiyos of the Asara Mamoris. That's where it begins. The Oisiyos of the 10 utterances that Hashem said when He created the world. Those Oisiyos, and from there, the Oisiyos, there's Chilufim, Utmuros, V'Gamatriyos. The letters evolve and get switched and get calculated. And each switch, each evolution of the Oisiyos represents, one second, sorry. Thank you. Each time the letters evolve, it represents another Yerida, or another Tzimtzum, if you will, as the Koyach Elaki, as this divine force goes through more and more Tzimtzumim until it can come down to every chair, to every table, to every blade of grass, to every leaf on every tree, etc., etc. The Alter Rebbe does say that these 10 utterances, these are Asara Mamoris, the 10 utterances themselves, those 10 things that are articulated in the Asara Mamoris, right? Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia, the light, the heavens, etc. These are larger Nivroim, larger creations. Al Kaponim, this is what's written, these are larger creations, and therefore less Tzimtzum is involved. There's a shorter distance, if you will, between Hashem, between the koyach that creates these created beings and the created beings themselves, because the created beings are larger, which means not just that they're physically larger, but they're more kalim, they're better suited to absorb, to receive this Mamala Kalalman, this light of Hashem. But as we go into smaller and, so to speak, less significant creations, so over there more and more Tzimtzumim are needed, and all of these Tzimtzumim are experienced, they're all facilitated through these Oisiyos, starting off at the Asara Mamoris, and going from there. Okay. We're actually going to finish, with Hashem's help, we're actually going to finish the Perek Zion today. We're up to the open bracket where it says V'achar kol hatzimtzumim ha'ela. I want to give just an introduction to the next couple of lines, and then Be'ez Hashem go through it. Okay, so here's I want to use this idea as an analogy, and it's an idea we're all familiar with. But there's an insight that Chassidus gives, which is going to be helpful here to understand the point that Alter Rebbe is going to make in the next few lines. So you're familiar, of course, with the idea, Chassidus talks about this a lot, that the process, the way the Eibishter created the world, the process of planting something and having it grow, involves something called Rikovoin Hagarin. Rikovoin Hagarin means that the seed that's planted in the ground, when you plant a tree, for example, so you take an apple seed and you put it in the ground, or an orange seed and you put it in the ground, or vegetables for that matter, whatever the case may be. So the seed that's planted into the ground needs to decompose. Called Rikovoin Hagarin. Rikovoin means the rotting or the decomposing process, Hagarin, of the seed that's placed into the ground in order for, let's say, the tree to grow. And if, for whatever reason, the garin, the seed, doesn't decompose properly, or doesn't decompose completely to the point where it's no longer seed, it's completely decomposed seed, if it doesn't go through that process completely, then the tree will never grow. The tree needs, in order for the seed to produce a tree, the seed needs to go through a complete recovery. The seed needs to go through a complete decomposing process. All right. What's the reason for this? On a physical level, I'm not gonna try to explain. I don't know, but Chassidus definitely does give a spiritual explanation for it. In fact, Chassidus gives a few explanations for it. The first today I want to talk about two. So the first explanation is that it's for the seed. That the seed needs to go through a decomposing process in order to become a tree. Why? Phenomenal concept, really phenomenal concept. Because a tree is the closest thing, or one of the closest things we have in this world, which is a moshel for bligvul, infinity. Why is it a moshel for infinity? Because a tree, let's say a fruit tree, an apple tree, right? The apple tree will produce apples. And the apples will have seeds. And those seeds can then be used to plant more trees, which will produce more apples, which will have more seeds, which can be used to plant more trees, and so it goes infinity, right? As is the famous story with one of the early settlers of the United States of America, that from one apple tree, or even from one apple, or even from one apple seed, you can take from this and you can make, in theory, Ein Sof apples. I say in theory because nothing in this world is Ein Sof. But it's not just a theoretical potential. The actual the apples that can grow from this are Ein Sof, and the apple trees that can go from it are Ein Sof. Kiyodua. So Chassidus says, so you're going to have the tree that's going to grow here is Ein Sof. The seed that you're putting in the ground is just a limited seed. Now, of course, the seed also possesses within itself this type of potential. But in order to transition from a simple seed, which is just one seed, into an apple tree that will contain within it that will produce apples with seeds that will go into more trees, etc., etc. So you're talking about a transition. The seed needs to transition from a seed into a tree. Whenever you make this type of transition, whenever you make a transition, a transformation is necessary. Now, what is the nature of the transformation which is necessary for this transition? It depends on the nature of the transition. So if the nature of the transition is such that I'm not changing in a significant way, just becoming a little bit bigger, just becoming a little bit stronger, a little bit more, so then growth is sufficient. Growth is sufficient for a relatively small transition. Growth is a sufficient transition process for relatively small transformation. But when you start talking about big transformations, and very big transformations, in this case, to transform from a seed into a tree, for this you need a different type of transition. And for this you need what Chassidus calls yesh v'yesh ayin be'emtza. Yesh v'yesh ayin be'emtza, which means to grow from one thing into an entirely different world, an infinite type of a jump, For this you need an ayin b'emsa. For this you need to kind of lose yourself, to lose your identity somewhere in between, in order to go from one to the other. All right, there's a lot to talk and to fabring about this. It's not for now, but this is in a ruchniistic sense. This is the concept of shivrei luchas, of the breaking of the luchas, right? The similar idea, where in order to transition, in order to go from one level to an infinitely higher level, in between you have to lose yourself. And the more infinitely the higher world is, the more you have to lose yourself in between. Right? The mashal for this again is Rikova and Hagarin, where the seed, in order to transition just from a simple seed into a full-on tree, the seed, as long as the seed is holding onto its identity, as long as the seed is holding onto its metzias, it's not going to be able to become a tree. In order to become a tree, it has to lose its metzias altogether. The mashal for this, by the way, would be again Rav and Talmud, student and teacher. Chassidus uses this mashal a lot, right? How much? Let's put it in these words. How much bittul does the student need in order to learn from his Rav? How much bittul does a student need? The answer is it depends how much is the distance between the student and the Rav. If the student understands that 1 + 1 = 2, and the teacher is just going to explain to him that once you understand that 1 + 1 = 2, you can now understand that 2 + 2 = 4. Excuse me. So that's not such a strong transition. It's growth, right? It's maybe for the student who can only understand that 1 + 1 = 2. There's maybe a revolutional element to this, but it's basically just growing. It's basically just working on the same premises, just developing it further and further. So in that case, the student doesn't need to be mevatel himself completely in the presence of the Rav. Fakert, the opposite, the student shouldn't be mevatel himself completely in front of the Rav, because the knowledge that the student has, the understanding that the student has, will help him to understand what the teacher is saying. But what if the distance, that's one example. The other example is, what if the distance between the teacher and the student is infinite? Right? What if the distance between the student and the teacher is such that compared to the teacher, the student is like somebody who thinks that 1 + 1 = 3. So now, because the gap between them is infinite, so now it works the other way around. As long as the student will insist on holding on to their way of understanding until now, they're not going to be able to absorb what the teacher is saying. So in this case, you would need, again, the mashal of Rikova Nagarin, you would need the seed to rot, to decompose. You would need the student to lose his metzias completely in order to be able to absorb, to hear what the Rav is saying. The more revolutionary it is, the higher it is, the more distant it is from the Talmud, the more the Talmud has to give up of his metzias in order to be a keli to hear what the Rav is saying. And if not, he won't even hear what the Rav is saying, right? The Rebbe would sometimes fabring about different things, different ideas, either there were concepts in Chassidus or activities that he wanted done or all sorts of things. And the Rebbe would basically say, like, the Chassidim they're not understanding, they're not complying, they're not coming along with it. Why? Because the Chassidim didn't want to? I mean, the Chassidim were ready to go for the Rebbe through fire and water. So what was the problem? These are not the Rebbe's words, but the problem is that the ideas that the Rebbe was pushing, the next frontier, was sometimes sort of a gap to the world of the Chassidim that was either infinite or close to infinity. So this type of a gap requires an avoid of tremendous bittul, where the person's got to be able to let go of their entire metzias as it was until now. And that can be a very difficult thing to do, right? The Rebbe said, "Open your eyes, you'll see Mashiach." Everybody's walking around going, "What does that mean? Open our eyes, we'll see Mashiach." I mean, I'm not asleep; my eyes are open. All I see is is a computer. What do you mean? Open your eyes to see Mashiach? In other words, the Rebbe is talking about a certain opening your eyes, a certain awareness that he wants us to be open to, that is truly transitional and truly transformative. We have to, it's a tremendous avodah. We have to be ready to let go. So the mashal for this is, you put a seed in the ground, nothing will grow. The tree will not grow until the seed completely lets go of its own metzias. All right, this is one explanation of why the seed needs to grow. Right? In other words, the idea here is that the seed, even before it decomposes, contains the potential to become a tree. But the process to go from seed to tree requires the seed losing its metzias in order to be able to develop in this way. Again, much more to discuss about it, but that's all I want for now. There's another explanation that Chassidus gives. Actually, an explanation from a different perspective, and really I would say a much more, who am I to say, but a much more profound explanation for why it's necessary for the seed to decompose, and it's not ultimately, inherently, only for the sake of the transition of the seed. This says there's something else entirely that's going on here. Here's what it is. A seed is just a dead seed. Well, not even if it's alive, but it's a davar gashmi. It's a physical thing. How is an apple seed going to become an apple tree? So obviously, for this you need a koyach elaki. For this you need a divine force. So Chassidus says, no problem. When the Eibishter created the world, on one of the days of creation, the Eibishter said, "Tadshe ha'oretz deshe." Let the earth, let the world, let the physical surface of the earth produce deshe. Produce deshe is translated as grass. Eisev mazriya zera. Grass or plants that mazriya zera, that have seeds. Eitz pri, oisa pri. Fruit that will contain seeds, that will produce other fruit, etc., etc. Oisa pri leminoi. That means there's a koyach elaki in the earth, in the physical earth. There's a koyach elaki that the Eibishter put, not just that keeps the earth in existence. Of course, it's also true. The Eibishter keeps couches in existence too, but things don't grow from couches. The Eibishter put an additional koyach elaki into the earth, that the earth has the power to make things grow. Okay, it's a koyach elaki. The koyach elaki that the earth has to make things grow will make an apple tree grow when you put an apple seed in the ground, if it has the right, elements, water, sunshine, etc., etc. But, so what's the problem? So you put an apple seed in the ground, let the koyach elaki make the apple seed grow into a tree. Right? No, the apple seed has to rot. So again, why? First explanation is because the apple seed needs to transition. Second explanation says Chassidus much deeper. There's another element. The koyach elaki, the divine force, the divine power that makes things in the ground, that makes things grow, has the ability to make an infinite amount of different types of things grow. In other words, besides for the fact that it's a koyach elaki, divine force, that is in the physical earth that makes physical things grow. So there's obviously a tremendous tzimtzum there, right? To take a koyach elaki and to use it to make physical things grow, beseder. But in addition to that, the koyach elaki is not defined by apple trees. It could make orange trees grow too, and peach trees, and nectarine trees, and lemon trees, and pomegranate trees, and date trees, and fig trees. In fact, the koyach elaki in the ground that could make physical things grow could make an infinite amount of physical things grow. So what's going to channel this infinite koyach elaki? Again, I'm using the word infinite not just because it's spiritual and godly in nature. Even once the spiritual and divine godly power has been put by the Eibishter in the ground to make physical things grow, it's still, because it remains in the level of potential, has the potential to make infinite things grow. So what's going to make this infinite power, what's going to limit it, bedavka specifically to apples, and to one apple tree? There's a tzimtzum necessary here. And if that tzimtzum doesn't happen, then a physical apple tree is not going to grow. The koyach elaki is going to say, what do you mean, I should make one apple tree grow? I can give you infinite amount of different types of trees, and I can give you an infinite amount of apple trees. There's an additional tzimtzum here that's necessary to take a koyach that could make an infinite amount of infinite trees grow, to be mitzamtzim it and say, no, you're going to make one tree grow, and it's going to be an apple tree, and it's going to be here. This is another tremendous tzimtzum. Chassidus says this tzimtzum of the koyach halaki, of Hashem saying to make trees grow, to limit it to one tree, this tzimtzum happens through the decomposing of the seed. When the seed decomposes, it arouses, if you will, it inspires the koyach halaki to make this particular seed into an apple tree. Now this needs to be understood. What's the connection? What's one thing got to do with the other? The decomposing of the seed inspires the koyach halaki to make one apple tree grow. What's the connection? When you tell me the seed needs to transition, and so in order to transition it needs bittul, this makes sense, because the seed needs to no longer be a seed, needs to become an apple tree. This is an transition of infinity. It makes sense that the seed decomposes in between to lose its previous metzias in order to become a greater metzias. We can work with this. But what does that have to do with the koyach hatzemeach? What's that got to do with the the divine koyach in the ground to make things grow? So Chassidus gives an explanation for this, and again, I want to just get to the point. Chassidus says, back to the moshel of Rav and Talmud, that Hashem has made it so that the bittul of the Talmud, somehow, these are the words of Chassidus, the bittul of the Talmud is ma'orer the Rav. That when the teacher sees that the student has been mevatel themselves, has made themselves into a keli, this inspires the Rav, this is ma'orer the Rav, the teacher, to be mashpia, to teach the student. So in the analogy, when the seed goes out of its shell, goes out of its own existence, not only does it enable the seed to be able to go from a limited being to an infinite being, but it also inspires, it also elicits the Rav, the teacher, the Eibishter, the Koyach HaTzeimeach, to empower it to become a tree. Okay. This is the introduction that I wanted to give to the next couple of lines that Alter Rebbe is going to say, that Alter Rebbe is going to explain here. What's that got to do with what we're learning about in Shaar Yichud Emunah? So Alter Rebbe is going to say like this. Alter Rebbe is going to say, when we talk about these tzimtzumim, right? Mamalik Kol Almin is this koyach of the Eibishter that's going to invest itself in physical beings and going to bring them into existence. Says the Alter Rebbe, you have again these two elements, these two aspects of tzimtzum going on. You have one aspect of tzimtzum, you to take a koyach halaki and bring it down to a davar gashmi, to a physical thing. Right? He's going to use the example in a few minutes of an even, of a stone. He's going to say the koyach to create a stone comes ultimately, for even is aleph ban. Ban is one of the names of Hashem. One of the ways of calculating. Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei comes to 52. It's called Shem Ban, a name of Hashem. Aleph is the presence of Hashem in this. So you're going to go from Shem Ban, from the name of Hashem, to a dead stone. Obviously, you're going to go through tremendous amount of tzimtzumim. But he says, but that's only one element to it. We have another aspect to it. That's one element of tzimtzum. The other element of tzimtzumim is, even after you've somehow crossed the bridge between divinity, godliness, and physicality, but now there's another bridge to cross, because you need that from this koyach halaki, there should be created one specific stone. And if you didn't have the second tzimtzum, you'd have a stone, but you'd have not one stone, you'd have infinite stones. Now the Eibishter wanted not just that the Eibishter created many different stones, but every stone is unique in its existence. And so this becomes another type of tzimtzum that's facilitated through Mamalik Kol Almin, in addition to the fact that Elokus produces Gashmias, produces Oilamos, produces worlds, it also produces individual worlds, and not infinite worlds. Okay, now let's read that inside. Open bracket, after all of these tzimtzumim that we've discussed. In other words, through the Oisiyos, with the Elokus, the Koyach Eliki comes into this world. And all the tzimtzumim that the Rebbeinu Shalom has decreed. for whatever reason, that from Elokus should come a physical world. This facilitated that we can have Oir V'Chayis, a godly light and life can be enclosed even even in this physical world. Even in the Tachtonim, even in physical worlds. Like stones or dirt, which are doimim. When you take a look at the word Evan, its name reflects its existence. Its name reflects where it gets its existence from. Its name comes, its shorish, its root, comes from this name of Hashem, which is Gematria 52, V'oid Aleph Noisefes, and an additional Aleph, Mishem Acher, V'oid Aleph Noisefes, Mishem Acher, L'tama Edu L'Yoyt. So there's the Alter Rebbe says, because of a reason that only Hashem knows, you need an additional Aleph. Fine. Say that's Evan. So an Evan, a physical stone, comes from the name of Hashem Shem Ban. Shem Ban Ba'atzma, Hashem's name Shem Ban, who ba'olam asal yonim oid. It's such a tremendously high existence, such a tremendously high spiritual world. Only through many powerful tzimtzumim, from one level to the next, you can get from Shem Ban, from Hashem's name, such a contraction, such a limitation of chayas, until it can enclose itself in this particular stone. And we call this koyach eliki that encloses itself in this stone, we call it nefesh hadoimim. Very powerful words. It actually seems like a contradiction in terms. Excuse me. Doimim means that it's lifeless. At least that's how we usually translate it. And yet, Alter Rebbe says, there's this concept called nefesh hadoimim, the nefesh of doimim, hamachaye umahava oisai, which brought it into existence, and brings it into existence every single second. Me'ayin liyesh b'chol reka, k'moshin parallel. V'zu bechinas mamala kalamin, masha'enkin bechinas soivav kalamin. This is mamala kalamin, not soivav kalamin. Soivav kalamin surrounds everything. Soivav kalamin would never give you a physical stone and one particular stone. Now listen to these words. And every one of these powers of Hashem and levels, Yochel Livroi Bruim, has the ability to create creations. Every divine force, every divine ability has the ability to create creations. Infinite, no end. Both bekamusam in their quantity, veichusam, and in their quality, and to give them life forever. Because it's the Eibishter's force that comes from the Eibishter's mouth, and nothing can contain it. So it would be infinite. It would be infinite in nature. Even if it's going to create worlds, it's going to create an infinite amount of worlds, and every world is, and all of these worlds are going to be infinite, both in terms of their quality and in terms of their quantity. And it's Ruach Hashem. Ein Matzar has no limitation. Of course, as the koyach eliki, as the divine force goes lower and lower, so it becomes lower. Each level, as the divine force descends, cannot create the same quality as the higher level of Hashem's koyach. But it can still create Ein Sof. It can still create an infinite amount of options. Mamala Kalalmin therefore means not just that it creates physical things or limited worlds, but it limits itself to creating specific individual worlds, like saying the koyach halaki, the koyach hatzemeach in the ground will limit itself to creating one specific apple tree. All right, why is this? Now, in these shiurim, everybody always asks, okay, so what do we do with this, right? So how does this help us in our life? Why is this helpful for us to know? It's incredibly important for us to know. Incredibly. I'll tell you why. What are we really saying here? What we're really saying here is that there's this concept of what Chassidus will call hislabshus. Hislabshus means enclothing itself in one specific address. The moshel for this, by the way, and another moshel for this, is nefesh v'guf, body and soul. Right? Where Chassidus explains, nefesh v'guf is a moshel for, in some ways, all right, previously in Shaar the Alter Rebbe said it's not a sufficient moshel, but in some ways it is a moshel for the creating of the world, where you have a body which is dead without a soul, and the soul encloses itself in the body and gives it life. Okay. A soul has, a nefesh, has the ability to give, in theory, ein sof, an infinite amount of bodies, life. A soul is not limited, a soul is not defined by one particular body. So it's like saying, a teacher doesn't have the limitation to teach one particular student. A teacher can teach an infinite amount of students. A soul can give life to an infinite amount of bodies, says Chassidus. Yeah, that's true before, listen to me very carefully. This idea that a soul can give life to an infinite amount of bodies, that's true before the soul comes into the body. But once the soul comes into the body, now we say a nefesh cannot give chayas to two bodies. Not possible. You have sometimes gilgulim or ibor, where the neshama will go from one body to the next. But one neshama, once it's invested in one individual, that neshama cannot then go and give another guf chayas at the same time. So the Eibishter chose to create the world in this way, that once the koyach halaki created one even, one tree, one chair, one moment in time, that koyach halaki can only create that specific individual existence. Nothing else. It cannot, it's gone through a tzimtzum that says that it cannot create something else. No. Not just not at the same time, forever. This koyach halaki now becomes limited. That's the word of Tzimtzum here. This koyach halaki taka becomes limited to this individual existence. Let's go back to the moshel of Rav and Talmud, right? The teacher and student. How many students can a teacher teach? In theory, infinite. In theory, infinite. Bring a teacher an infinite amount of students. The teacher will teach. How many students will learn from what the teacher is teaching? As much as the teacher teaches. That's as many students as sitting there while the teacher teaches. That's how many students can learn from him. Chassidus says, oh no, that's not really teaching. That's not really teaching. Really teaching is where the Rav sits with one Talmud, one. And in the Rav invests himself in that Talmud's way of understanding. Yechidus. How many people can a Rebbe see in Yechidus? Answer, infinite. How many infinite, if a Rebbe is not seeing anybody in Yechidus, so to speak, then a Rebbe can sit with infinite people. But at a time that a Rebbe is sitting with one individual, at that time, the entire Rebbe is invested in this one individual. And that's what Alter Rebbe, this idea is what the Alter Rebbe is concluding Perek Zayin of Tanya with. This is the meaning of Mamala Kalalman. Mamala Kalalman doesn't just mean that there's Tzimtzumim and that the Eibishter, that there's Tzimtzumim and that the Eibishter allows in the end for a koyach halaki to lower itself down for physical things to exist. If it were that, then there would be an infinite amount of physical things that would exist. The pshat of Mamala Kalalman is that there's going to be one stone with these molecular elements, with this particular DNA, one. In all of existence, only one. There's going to be one individual with these particular character traits, one. And there's going to be a koyach halaki that's invested in this fiber of existence to the exclusion of everything else. That's Mamala Kalalman. Okay. Now you'll ask, why? Now we've pushed the point so far. Now we're going to start to wonder why. Why? Why would a Rav, if he could teach 1,000 students, teach only one student? Why would a nefesh, if it could give chayas to an infinite amount of bodies, give chayas to only one body? Why would a koyach eliki, if it can create so many worlds, why would it create only one or one of each type? So in the mashal with a Rav and a Talmud, you'll say simple. Because if he teaches a bunch of students, then the teacher has no control. He doesn't get to choose to decide how the students will understand what he's saying. Maybe the students will misunderstand what he's saying. He has no control over it. In order to make sure the student understands correctly, the teacher has to sit with the student, and the student has to tell the teacher how the student understands what the teacher is saying, and the teacher has to make sure that it's correct. And of course, it never is correct. So the teacher has to develop it and perfect it, etc., etc., etc. But with the Eibishter and all of creation, the Eibishter is not going to create the world incorrectly, chas v'shalom. Whatever the Eibishter wants is what's going to be. So what's the value in having one? What's the deeper reason why in the end a Rav needs to invest himself in one Talmud, or a nefesh needs to invest itself in one guf, or a koyach hatzameach needs to make one tree grow at a time, one tree specifically? The answer that Chassidus gives is shocking. The answer that Chassidus gives is that when Mamalakalman, when the koyach halaki of the Eibishter, when the Rav, when the Nefesh invests itself in one Talmud, one Guf, one Nivra, one creation, one Evan, if you will, at that point it's being mayor, it's shining, it's being pronounced that all of creation, the entire kavona of the Eibishter and all of existence and bringing everything into existence is being manifest, is being expressed through this specific detail and corner of creation here. It all expresses itself. The entire Koyach Ein Sof of the infinity of the Eibishter is going to come down to 1 second of creation, one moment, one decision that we make, right? One bracha, one shahakal niyu b'dvarei, one mitzvah, one element of creation. And in the end, that's the Pshat Mamala Kalalman, that the entire essence of the Eibishter is invested in the end in one tree, in one apple, in one human being, in one mitzvah, in one element of creation. Right? I heard that the Rebbe was once, a very famous story, that the Rebbe was once Fabrengen, and there were people who needed to leave. They needed to go to the airport. And they were anxious. They were sitting at the Fabrengen. They anxious. They didn't want to leave the Fabrengen. Of course, in fact, the Fabrengen had been made as it says Chem L'Shalom for them. They were about to go back to Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to leave the Fabrengen, but they had to catch a flight. So the Rebbe detected that they were struggling because they felt like they were being pulled in a different direction. So the Rebbe said that there are people who are sitting here and they're looking at their watches, they're looking at their clocks, they're eager to go. Then the Rebbe said there are people, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe said there are people who are not looking at their watches, but they're holding themselves back. They want to look at their watches, but they're holding themselves back from looking at the watches, out of derech eretz. So the Rebbe says the people who are looking at their watches are disturbing the Fabrengen. The people who are controlling themselves not to look at the watches are disturbing the Fabrengen even more. Right? Because their thoughts are so loud. So the Rebbe said the reason why they're anxious and they're eager to go is because they forgot what it says in Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah, the Rebbe said. That the Eibishter recreates the world every single second from new. Which means, the Rebbe said, that the airport doesn't exist yet, and the airplane that you have to catch doesn't exist yet, and the luggage and the airport, nothing exists. Right now, you're here now, the Rebbe said. Now, this is the tachlis of everything. L'havdil, the secular world, calls this idea, be present. Right? Don't be obsessed with the past, don't be obsessed with the future, be present. Inherently, it's a Hasidic concept, and a very profound Hasidic concept. The idea is that if the Eibishter created this moment in time, this space, this individual, this challenge, that this individual, that this specific person is facing, dealing with this opportunity, this family, this etc., then the person needs to understand not to chas v'shalom make them feel overwhelmed, but the significance of it. The significance of it is that the essence of the Eibishter and the entire tachlis hakavona bebrias v'ishavas ha'olamas is all invested in this detail of creation, of existence. It's no surprise, according to Chassidus, that the Rambam paskins lahalocha, and the Rebbe quoted this thousands of times, that a person should view themselves, their entire life until this point, as being completely in the balance, and the whole world as being completely in the balance, and the next decision that I make, the next choice that I make, in thought, speech, or action, will govern, will determine, will set the course for all of existence, past, present, and future. Why? Sounds like a silly thing to say, until you learn Chassidus, and you understand that an Ein Sof Eibishter, an Eibishter that's Ein Sof in every way, has invested himself and created and produced this moment, not because he's trying to do away with his Ein Sof, Chas v'Shalom, but he's invested all of the Ein Sof in this element of existence, and this becomes the pshat of Malak Alamin, right? I once heard from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson. So Zayin Gesund, he speaks about this a lot. I got 2 more minutes. I'll tell you the story very briefly. The Rebbe was listening to a radio interview in 1969 that was done, I believe, by a radio talk show host and Chabad Shliach at the time, who was Rabbi Zalman Posner. I don't know if I'm saying all the details correctly, but basically, one of the questions that the radio talk show host asked Rabbi Posner is, why is the Torah so invested, pay so much attention to such simple, mundane human things like what I eat for breakfast? And if I eat Rahman al-Islam tray for breakfast, who cares? What's the big deal? And the interviewer was Jewish, and he was, he knew a little bit. He said, he tells his audience, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, those of you who are Jews, who had the chveis, treif, ham, and whatever, God knows what, for breakfast, they would take you to the Beis Hamikdash, and they would whip you and give you lashes and right? What kind of a religion is this that get out of my kitchen? Anyways, Rabbi Posner answered what he answered, but the Rebbe was listening to this, and the Rebbe was not happy with his answer. And the Rebbe said, the next time the Rebbe Fabreng, he spoke about this. And the Rebbe said, the person who was asked this question is Gevorn Fatumult. He became confused at the time. He was confronted. He didn't give a good answer. And the Rebbe said the answer that he should have given should have been from the story of the moon landing. If he would have remembered the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, that everything that happens is instruction of Avodas Hashem, he would have used the moon landing as an example to answer this individual's question. And the Rebbe gave the following analogy. The Rebbe said, imagine if the astronauts, as they were strapped up in this spaceship that eventually took them to the moon, before it took off, or while it was taking off, or right after it took off, imagine they would pull out a cigarette box and light up a cigarette and start smoking. No, versteht sich what would happen? They would blow up the spaceship. They would blow themselves up. They would blow up the whole mission. They would have ruined, besides for killing themselves and blowing the spaceship, they would be destroying millions, billions of dollars, years and years of work and research, and really the hopes and the aspirations of an entire country and the entire world who was watching this experience. They would blow the whole thing. Stibber said, what if the astronaut says, what do you mean? It's nobody's business if I smoke. It's my business. I would like to take a cigarette and smoke. What are you? Why are you reacting that way? Why are you overreacting? It's just my business, what I do in my privacy. I'm smoking here. Obviously, the Rebbe says it's a silly example. Why? Because of context. If you smoke in your backyard but nobody's around, Beseder, all you're doing is endangering yourself. But if you're smoking on a spaceship, and after you were made astronauts to go to the moon and the whole world is watching, and the United States of America, hopes and aspirations and all the rest of it, and you smoke there, you're destroying the whole mission. The outrage of the world would be justified. Says the Rebbe, every Yid is on a mission. Every moment of time is part of a mission. Every element of creation it's part of there's a journey here. It starts with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It ends with Mashiach. All of the essence of the Eibishter and all of Jewish history and all of existence, the Eibishter invested it, Memalek Kol Almin, in every specific detail of creation. The Rebbe says, the question is why a Yid who eats treif, Rahman al-Islam, gets 39 lashes? That's not the question. The question is why it doesn't get more? The answer is the Eibishter is a Rahman, has mercy, etc. The Yid can always do tshuva and fix it, etc. But in terms of appreciating the significance of what it is, the aspect, the element, the details of our lives, the Eibishter is Memalek Kol Almin. The Eibishter himself fills and empowers, invests himself in every moment of creation. What we eat for breakfast, whether we make a bracha, how we live our lives, even in what seems like the tiniest of details, contains within itself all of Jewish history. From the beginning, all of the purpose of the creation of the world, from the beginning till the end, all of the koyach elaki, the divine powers that are involved in the creation of the world, it contains within it all. All of this exists within every detail of our lives. If we lived this way, we wouldn't struggle ever with the wondering if we're significant, if we have an impact, it's like, or anything like that. Quite the contrary. Every detail of creation, every detail of our lives is infinitely significant with the entire essence of Hashem. Have a wonderful week. Next week in Mirz Hashem, we'll continue with Perek Ches.